Well, thank you very much. My name is Judith Santmeyer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Okra. From looking at the quick participant list, many of you have been on prior sessions with us talking about stabilization grants, and today we're going to be focusing on Phase 4. So Phase 4 application is currently available to eligible programs in the organization dashboard of the OPR, and the deadline to submit the application is 5 p.m. on January 12th, 2024. For the expense period, so this is when the receipts, documentation need to be for all subgrants, is July 1, 2023 through June 30th of 2024. Reconciliations for Phase 4 will open February 1st of 2024 and are due no later than July 31st of 2024. At any time during the presentation, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to share those. I believe we can do that via chat, and then we'll also have time for questions at the end as well. So our Phase 4 eligibility, the programs must be open and serving children. Thus, in bullet 2, it's not for opening a new program. Program is not in enforcement. This component is checked twice, so one at the time of application and once before payment occurs. If a program is found to be in enforcement, that application is stopped and the payment is not made. A program does not have to have applied for a prior phase to be eligible. So folks that didn't apply for any of the phases or just one of the phases, they can all apply for Phase 4. The calculation, the details around the calculation are located in the Department of Job and Family Services manual procedure letter, but the general concept is here. Centers have a base amount and a per child amount that get added together for the total award. Family child care is a base amount and a per child amount, and an additional component for non-traditional hours if that is applicable. All of the per child amounts are based on licensing, and that is as of October 31st of 2023. The same is true for non-traditional hours. That designation had to be an OCLQS by October 31st of 2023. In-home aides receive a flat rate amount. Application requirements. So if you have completed an application for a prior stabilization grant, this is going to seem very similar. So it's pre-populated from the OPR. There is applicant demographic information. The fields for funding in the application have the maximum funding amount. So that is the total award calculated. And then there's the requested funding amount. So how much your program is drawing down. In many cases, those amounts would be the same, right? So the maximum funding amount of the total award, and the program wants to request everything that is due to them in the calculation. For some programs, they may select a requested amount that is less than their maximum funding amount, which is definitely possible. And they have up until the deadline of January 12th if they change their minds and would like to request another application up to the maximum funding amount. This time in Phase 4, we have the completion of the payment portal and the utilization of the GIAC tool for ACH electronic payments. So many professionals, we introduced this with Hero Pay, that we had to complete the GIAC tool to be able to process that payment electronically. So that is in play for programs now as well. Another component that we are working with around payment portal is around tax identification numbers. So we have a database that we utilize with the IRS to confirm those tax identification numbers. And if there is a mismatch there, our team will reach out to complete a W-9 to get a match with the IRS before the payment is distributed. So I say that because, we will be reaching out if there is an issue like that. So I just want to make sure folks are aware of that. So subgrant eligibility by program type. So if you find your program type there on the left, you can tell as you scroll across which subgrants are available to that program type. So centers, all of them are. Family Child Care has operating workforce, and one of the access developments in-home aids is strictly operating. And then ODE, who serve publicly funded children, is operating workforce and mental health workforce and family support. Wanted to pause it. Did someone have a question? I thought I heard. Okay. So the subgrant activities, I will refer folks to the manual procedure letter because there's some activities have been changed and or refined for phase 4. So going through those and operating new pandemic costs, that first bullet that talks about personnel costs, all of the items related to payroll and personnel costs have been merged together in operating new pandemic costs. So if you remember the last phase, there was a component in operating, there was a component in workforce. We've merged all those together just for simplicity's sake, so that you have what currently reads as paying personnel costs, including maintaining / increasing wages or benefits. So that whole benefit component, all of the pieces around wages are there in operating. For workforce recruitment and retention, those bullets then, of course, related to personnel and benefits were the first 2 bullets, so those have been removed. And then the recruitment activities, the refinement added there is to increase early childhood workforce. We had some folks that confuse that for recruiting for families that they serve, but this is specifically for employees. Access development subgrant. So the biggest change is that technology has been removed. And then we still have the concept of expanding infant, toddler, school age, or care for children with special needs, or expanding hours of operation to include non-traditional hours. So that remains the same. And then the use for those programs who are participating in therapeutic childcare. So that is a program through Ohio Children's Alliance. And so there's 7 of them in the state. If they need funds to administer that program, that is there at their disposal. Finally, in mental health, workforce, and family support, when we look at providing family engagement activities, those activities must be on site. So an on-site family game night, those types of activities that you're working with families cannot be at off-site or considered leisure or entertainment activities. Awesome. So allowable expenses, provide the activities there are outlined in the manual procedure letter. I can't stress enough the expense periods. They're listed there again, July 1 through June 30. And then looking for selecting those activities for each subgrant. So as you anticipate how you'll spend the dollars, you'll need to select those activities. If you find that through the process, you need to change an activity, you are able to do that. But what I would encourage you is to make sure that that is after you receive the funds, because when we reopen the application, that changes the approval date. So I don't want anyone to be delayed for their payment. So if you do change activities, I would do that much closer to the reconciliation time there, February 1st, to make sure that the payments have been processed. Non-allowable expenses are very similar to what we had last time, so it cannot be used for purchase of a new program, not for construction or major renovations or remodeling. We can't use gift cards or things like gift cards, gift certificates, anything that holds a value beyond the initial transaction. The federal government deems gift cards being spent when the gift card value is zero. So there is really no way for us in the potential of gift cards to know when someone has physically used all of the gift cards. So we're not able to utilize that transaction. And then any gaming system, accessories, things of that nature are not allowable. Grant reminders. So for this particular purpose, no cash transactions with the related documentation that are needed if your program is selected for a desk review. Cash transactions, as their very nature, are very difficult to document. So I would avoid those. Cash app usage is possible, but it must be able, the app must be able to provide the documentation required. This would include who was being paid, a date, why they were paid, any of those related documentation items. No handwritten receipts. So the common handwritten receipt would be the receipt book that's purchased from a office supply store that is completely handwritten as far as who was paid, an amount, and why. We're not able to accept those. The one caveat to that is there are some third-party vendors who utilize a standard form. A very common example you've heard me provide are carpet cleaning companies. So they have a standard form that has things printed like their address, their information, but then they're writing on the form how many rooms they cleaned, things of that nature. Those are accepted because they are from a third party. When we're looking at types of documentation that may be needed for desk reviews, we're looking at both invoice and payment documentation. So if you envision going to a store, paying for something, getting a receipt, a lot of times that invoice and payment documentation is on the same receipt. It's saying what you purchased, it's saying how you purchased it. For situations that may be online purchases, the invoice documentation would be your order, your order confirmation. This is what you bought. That's how much it is. And then your payment documentation would be more of, if you're utilizing a credit card to pay for that you used the credit card information as the payment documentation. So we need to see both sides of that if selected for a desk review. For access development, there are several items in the guidance document that are examples of what can be used in access development, and specifically around expanding for age groups and expanding hours. But the activity must be met. So if you're saying, yes, I'm going to expand to one of these age groups, infant, toddler, school age, or care for children with special needs, so that you can utilize, let's say classroom materials, for example, you have to be able to say, yes, I did serve more children, and thus I have this expense. That's a little different than the others, so we just want to make sure folks are aware. I'll pause there before we dive into reconciliations. Are there any questions that I can answer so far?
Yes, there was some in the chat box.
Okay.
One was, can we give our parents Kroger gift cards for Christmas?
No gift cards are allowed with these funds.
And I believe there was another one. Let me try and scroll to find it. Oh, this person is a type A provider with non-traditional hours. And it does not show that, but when she emailed someone, sorry, there's a little icon on my screen that keeps getting in the way of my view. They emailed someone, told them to go ahead and submit. They did, but they're still not seeing the amount has changed. Should she email them again or just wait?
I would email them again at support, just to make sure that we get that corrected for you.
And I think that was all the questions I'm seeing.
Okay, great. Next up is talking about reconciliation. So the reconciliation button to add a reconciliation will be added February 1st of 2024. It is one reconciliation per phase. So if there are multiple applications for a program, all of that will be combined to one reconciliation. It's site specific, just like the application by license number. And activities are pre-populated from the application. So that is where once we get to the reconciliation point, if you find that you need to change activities and add one, it's letting support know so that we can reopen the application so that can be added. If it's something that you've selected an activity but you didn't spend any funds, it's then entering a 0 for that activity. Also, connecting the expense to the correct activity. So this is where making sure that the expenses that are provided are for the activity in question. Again, that's why we allow changing activities, just to make sure that we have an accurate depiction of how the funds were spent. The time space percentage for family childcare is in play here as well. So a common example I provide is, let's say flooring. You would only utilize the space utilized for the childcare program for that expense. Next is unused versus unspent funds. So unused funds would be funds that are not drawn down by the program and they're not then not received by the program. So programs do not need to reconcile unused funds. Unspent funds are different because this is received by the program, but they are not able to provide us the information or documentation of how they were spent. In the case of unspent funds, that is where we would need to get a repayment back to Okra for any unspent funds. And so that's where our grants review team typically reach out to make sure, are there any other expenses that are allowable that can be included, because we want to reduce or eliminate any repayments that are required. A program opening or closing during the expense period also changes what the expense period is. So one example is a program receives the funds, they close March 31st of 24. At the point of their closing, that determines the expense period. So in that particular example, their expense period would be July 1 of 2023 through the closing date of March 31st of 2024. So as programs are having those activities, it's just being aware that that does change the expense period for them. All right, so there are two reconciliation activities. One is the reconciliation expense report. So all programs complete a reconciliation expense report. It is a subtotal of actual expenses by activity. So we are looking for actual amounts with dollars and cents. We're asking that you do not round. You can enter an amount greater than the grant amount. So if you spent more than that, you can enter that actual amount. Again, here, 0 can be entered for an activity that you had selected but didn't spend anything on. And then if you're in the situation of unspent funds that we spoke about, there'll be a certification for balance of funds. So it'll add a bullet point at the bottom where the certifications are that will say, yes, I understand that a certain dollar amount is due back to Okra via repayment. If you're, this is a great check to make sure that as you're entering those items, they're adding up and that there isn't a balance. So if you are entering those and it says, wait, I have a balance, I would go back and make sure that those have been entered correctly and adding up for you as well. The second activity is the reconciliation desk review. So this is only 20% of programs complete this process. The purpose of a desk review is to add the documentation that supports the amounts claimed in the expense report. If your program is selected for a desk review, your reconciliation will appear in additional action and the program will receive a notification that says that they've been selected for a desk review. To complete the process, you'll go right back into the same record that you completed the expense report. And at the bottom of that record, there will be an uploader that will appear that you'll be able to add the documents. You can add one document, you can add multiple documents. We ask that you label the documents that you're uploading. That helps us identify what expenses go to what activity. And then if at any time we find that there was an expense that is unallowable, we work with the program to replace the item so that, again, we're looking at minimizing or eliminating the potential for repayments. So the documents that are posted on Okra's website are helpful through this process. So we have the manual procedure letters there for all program types, frequently asked questions, a guidance document, and user guides that are there. Currently, this is all application driven. We'll be adding those guidance documents and user guides as well for the reconciliation closer to that February 1st launch. And at this point, we'll open it up for questions. But if you have questions after this call, we ask that you submit them to support@okra.org. The regional child care resource and referral agencies, so 4C in this case, is also providing support related to stabilization grants. So they are a resource for you as well. So those are the slides that we have, and I can definitely take any questions that you have at this point.
Judith, someone did ask in the chat, can they pay themselves?
Yes, so that is still the same as prior phases. It's just that it would be located in operating sub-grant this time around.
Hello, are we allowed to come off of mute to ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Angela, and I have been in touch with Okra about the wrong dollar amounts being, I submitted my application, I am non-traditional. And so one amount says $4,980 when it should say $6,980 for the non-traditional. I was told by Okra to go ahead and submit for the wrong amount, and you could possibly, when they fix it in the system, that you would adjust the application and send me the corrected amount on another. But my application is just still sitting there as submitted. And when you go back from phase 1, 2, and 3, we were approved like a day later. So I was kind of concerned, one, because my application is wrong. 2, it's still sitting when they're normally approved after 2 or 3 days. And 3, I did follow up, but I hadn't heard back. So I wasn't sure what to do. And I'll go back on mute.
Oh, no problem. So,
Thank you.
yes. So there are a few points in there that I'll address. So one is the time span for approving applications. We have received thousands of applications since the point of opening on November 20th. We've approved 3,200 of them so far, and we're working in the order that they were received. So we'll continue to work through the approval process until all of them that are received through January 12th are reviewed. But we can't I understand it's comparative to prior phases, but with this phase being a shorter application window, folks, unfortunately, I think there's some myths going around on Facebook and such that has created a little bit of a sense of urgency about, funds are limited, things of that nature, that folks are kind of front loading the application process, which we have funds to account for all eligible programs. So there isn't that, but I think that has played a factor in how many applications we've received in such a short amount of time. But we will continue to do that. On the non-traditional component, once that is corrected, it will be adding an application to draw down the remainder of the fund. So I did want to be clear about what that next step is for you. And then they are working with ODJFS to remedy those non-traditional hours, because the information we utilize comes from OCLQS. And so we have to go back to the source of the information to get those corrections.
Thank you.
Sure.
There was also a question, how much can owners or administrators receive?
So our rule of thumb is 10% of the award could be utilized in that way.
And then I have been approved, but need to change my category.
So I would wait until you receive the funds to do that. So once that happens, then I would reach out to support to be able to change a category that's needed.
And then there is a question, we are paid through ADP. Is that enough information to show that we are using it for payroll?
Yes, so typically the payroll journal for the pay periods that you're utilizing for the grant award would be acceptable should your program be selected for a desk review.
And what is the time frame to receive the funds?
We are anticipating 4 to 6 weeks from the application approval date.
Heather, we didn't hear you.
Mhm.
Heather, were there any additional questions?
Oh, I am so sorry. My
Oh.
computer froze up for a
Oh,
second.
sure.
No, there is not any more questions. Oh, let's see. Oh, no, there is. Are
Okay.
the amounts the same? How are centers, or how all centers regardless of capacity? Are the amounts the same regardless of capacity?
So the base amount is the same, but then the capacity, the per child amount would be based on the capacity of the program, the center.
And that is all the questions
Okay,
that's in the chat.
wonderful. And any others? And again, you feel free to come off mute if you have a question. All right, hearing none, I just want to thank everyone for allowing me to talk today.
Hey, Judith, there is one
yes.
more quick. I am so sorry.
Sure,
It
no
says,
worries.
okay, if the capacity is wrong, what should they do to get that corrected?
So the one thing that we would need to check in that case is what is the capacity on the list that we have, and that's again as of October 31st. And then if that list still doesn't agree with what the program says their capacity is, I would reach out to the licensing specialist, because JFS has to tell Okra that that number is something different than what's on that list.
Hello, my name is Carmen Harris. I have a question.
Carmen? Sure.
I was wondering, where can we find the application? You said OPR? Is that Okra?
Yes, so it's the Ohio Professional Registry, and the application appears on the organization dashboard.
The organization dashboard. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi,
Awesome.
I have a question.
Sure.
Mine already had got approved for the phase 4, but there's another like one here in the draft. Will that just delete itself out?
It won't delete itself out until after the application window closes.
Okay. I didn't know. Does that mean I clicked on it 2 times?
Possibly,
Okay.
but yeah, we'll clean those up at the end of the application window.
Okay, no problem.
All right, thank you.